Linguistics Behind the Scenes.
What you always wanted to know about language and how to explore it.
With Christina Sanchez-Stockhammer
and Dominic Piazza.
Hello, Dominic, and hello, everyone out there. Welcome back to Linguistics Behind the Scenes.
Welcome back indeed. Christina, how are you?
I'm doing very well. What about you?
I'm doing well. I'm always doing well when we sit down to record a podcast.
Same as me.
Christina, I must say, when I originally came to Germany, I expected to learn a lot about German, but actually during my time here, it's astonishing to me how much I've actually learned about English, particularly because normally the variety of English used here is British English or European English. And I thought I knew most of the British vocabulary, but I keep finding new words I didn't know.
Yeah, I also find that very interesting. I mean, I think quite a lot of the people that I speak English with speak British English, but talking to you has helped me learn so much about American English. I think it's really, really so interesting. I mean, most of it is the same, but there are these differences that are fun.
Yes, I agree. Aside from the accents, I feel like they're 99% the same. That might be too much. 95% the same. But I still keep finding new things I didn't know. For example, at one point, you and I had a very spirited conversation when I first encountered the phrase washing up liquid, because
Yes.
I genuinely did not know what it was.
That really surprised me. I mean, it's so obvious. Washing up liquid. It's the thing that you use, which is liquid, for cleaning your dishes.
Yeah, except that I feel like washing up might mean you're personally washing yourself up. So maybe it might be like a type of like body wash or something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah. But so what would you call that thing that you use to clean the dishes?
Yeah, it's dish soap.
That also makes sense.
Yeah, because it's soap that you use for the dishes. So.
Yeah. Even though I have to say, to me, like when I hear soap, I mean, I know there's also liquid soap and I also have some liquid soap at home. But actually, when I hear soap, I think more of a soap bar.
Ah, interesting. A bar of soap. Yeah, I mean, not so uncommon. Like, we have laundry detergent, which we call it laundry detergent, but more casually, it wouldn't be uncommon to hear someone call it laundry soap. Certainly we do that in my family. We might say, we're out of laundry soap. We need more laundry soap. Because it functions as soap. It functions as soap that goes in the laundry. So it cleans the clothes.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I have to say, what I also found very interesting is when you told me that you call something horseback riding.
Yes, that's right.
Because if I talked about riding on a horse, I would just call it riding. So no need for me to mention it's on a horse or on the back of a horse, because I would say that's kind of expected.
Right, but if you're just riding, then what are you riding? Because we ride on a train, or we ride in a car, or we ride on a plane, which apparently in British English they don't. Apparently they don't ride on a train. Maybe they take a train, or they go by train.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that would be said in British English. But then, of course, I mean, I'm a learner myself, so I wouldn't know everything. But what I find very interesting as well is that most of the time, I mean, people will still understand, because the context will make it clear it's a horse or it's a train or whatever you're riding. I mean, imagine I said, I like reading. What would you think I was reading?
Yeah, to me, this strongly implies that you read novels, in my opinion. And I think that's how people usually understand it. If you say, I like reading, or I don't know, I read books, I think it implies that you read novels, because maybe novels they're more associated with kind of leisure and entertainment, whereas nonfiction is much more informational and encyclopedic.
Yeah. Even though I have to say that I think I actually also read more nonfiction in my free time. But yeah, so if I said I like reading, I would also assume that means reading books and less reading magazines or newspapers or websites, which is interesting, isn't it? So, I mean, we do fill in things. So that's a normal thing that we do when we hear words which are kind of unspecified.
Yes, I also, by the way, I prefer to read nonfiction, which is always a great disappointment. I'll meet someone, I'll say, I like reading, and they'll say, oh, I like reading too. What are your favorite genres? And then I'll say, oh, I read nonfiction, sorry.
Aww.
And then immediately their enthusiasm evaporates because nonfiction is generally viewed as a bit more dry because often it can be very dry, but it can also be, if it's done well, it can be really engaging.
Absolutely. That's why I love it. But to come back to those differences, between British and American English, what I find very interesting is, for example, the word fancy dress. So if I asked you to come to my party in fancy dress, then I would expect you to come dressed up. For example, I don't know, as a superhero or whatever. But I know it's different in American English.
Yes, it sounds like you'd expect me to come dressed up in a costume. A fancy dress to me would be a formal attire. Maybe if I was a man, it would be a tuxedo, which also I learned the British don't say tuxedo, they say dinner jacket. Or maybe if I was a woman, it would be like a very elegant type of gown or dress. I didn't actually, the fancy dress one I just learned I learned that like a month ago. So I didn't even know about that until now. So if you're in the UK and they talk about a fancy dress party, don't show up in your tuxedo. You will be out of place.
Yeah, but the good thing is you can always pretend you're James Bond or something like that.
That's right.
It's worse the other way around, like Bridget Jones going to a party dressed up.
yeah, definitely would be if you went to a black tie event in a Halloween costume. Yeah, that would be worse. You're right.
Yeah, sometimes it can be dangerous to try and work out what compounds like fancy dress mean. It's the same, by the way, in other contexts. Think of chocolate biscuits. Chocolate biscuits are biscuits that are covered in chocolate or that contain some cocoa, But then there's also dog biscuits. And dog biscuits don't contain any dogs, hopefully. They're made for dogs.
Yes, you're right. Very, very, very fertile ground here for jokes upon jokes upon jokes. You could find so many words. You can find so many words where, the noun in front does not describe the contents of the noun that follows. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. And the reason for this is that compounds are very special. They're very short and economic. But at the same time, that also means that they're more ambiguous than a phrase. In compounds, the different parts that come together to form this new word, the relations between these parts can be of very different types. For example, a cane chair is made of cane. So here we've got the material relation. But an armchair is not made of arms. It has arms. So it's a kind of, part whole thing. Or if you have a deck chair is found on a deck. Or a swivel chair allows you to swivel. Or a folding chair can be collapsed. So here we're dealing with a function. So there's many, many different kinds of relation that you have between the parts. And of course, that can be exploited in jokes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this I think is we're talking about English here. It's interesting how maybe other languages do compounds or don't do compounds. So, for example, with French, as I understand, compounds in the kind of English style are, I never really see any compounds like that. Instead, they end up extending the phrase out, which kind of eliminates the ambiguity. So what I mean to say is in English, you'd have a paper towel. And in French, it would be a towel of paper. Okay, that tells you the towel is comprised of paper. Or in English, you'd have body wash. Does the wash have body in it? No, it's wash for your body. And in French, you have savon pour le coeur, which is wash for the body. So while they can't quite do compounds in the same way, it ends up actually being more descriptive in a way that they don't have this kind of same weird ambiguity.
Yeah, exactly. That seems to be a kind of Germanic thing, and French is a Romance language, so they use these kind of prepositional structures.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, most of the time we understand what is meant even in English because we know the conventional meaning of the compounds, and well, we know that the dog biscuit is for dogs and not with dog meat.
Yes.
But it's something that people are very often unaware of. I mean, like I recently also kind of read about someone who said, "Oh, it's interesting. The word birthday consists of birth and day. I hadn't noticed," and that is just because we think about them as chunks, as concepts, you know?
Well, there's a famous line in a very famous TV show called Breaking Bad, which I won't spoil anything, but there's a character named Saul Goodman who he's kind of a criminal underworld lawyer. He specializes in helping criminals. And so he says, you don't just need a criminal lawyer, you need a criminal lawyer. So that's a direct wordplay on these compounds.
I love that one. Yeah, and I mean, of course, what you can also do is like you can sometimes also see, oh, wait a moment, there's interesting parallels that you didn't expect. Like there's outlaws, people outside the law, but there's also in-laws who are your spouse's parents.
Yeah, that one is a bit more clear when you see it written down, but certainly when you hear it spoken, you might expect if an outlaw is someone outside the law, then an in-law must be a law-abiding citizen or someone living inside the law.
Yeah, somehow. Yeah, and I mean, like different languages too. I mean, they do that in different ways. So, for example, I mean, if you think about the word drawer, you know, in English, what's a drawer? I mean, a drawer is something that you can draw, that you can pull. But in German, we have the word Schublade, which is like a pushing box. I mean, it's true. I mean, you pull and you push a drawer, but there's a different focus in each.
That's true. The German philosophy of drawers, which I personally discovered during my German language learning journey. Yes, in English, you pull a drawer, you draw it. The connection there isn't so obvious because the pronunciation is so changed. But a drawer is a drawer. That hurt to say. But in German, it's you push it. Which is fascinating. Now, I would argue a drawer in its default position is closed. So I think pulling it out is maybe the more important action, but hey, to each their own, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's interesting what you focus on.
Yeah.
Same for a word like screwdriver.
That's right. You drive it in, which to drive something can also kind of mean to push it or orchestrate it in a way. Yeah, which but in German it's a screw puller.
Yeah, exactly. Schraubenzieher, which is strange, but I mean, both ideas are part of this concept, but then different languages decide to somehow use a conventional word that emphasizes a different aspect of this.
That's true. Well, you do use a screwdriver for unscrewing things. But once again, is it the more famous action? I'm not so sure.
I'm not so sure about these. I have to say that, to be honest, I think the English words make more sense here.
but maybe in terms of it serves a dual function, but which function is the prime function? Yeah, that's true.
But then, of course, I mean, there's other cases where I would say German wins.
Okay.
For example, if you think about the word a watch, in German, we say Armbanduhr, which is armband clock. So, I mean, that makes more sense, I would say, because it's like, it describes the idea of a watch, whereas a watch just relates to the fact that you watch it. So I think that's kind of very general.
That's exactly right. German has many examples where they use this very kind of cute descriptive. Well, I call it cute from my perspective because it's so directly descriptive of what the item is. A personal favorite of mine is instead of a glove, the Germans say Handschuh, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a handschuh. And who am I to disagree? A glove very much is somewhat like a shoe for your hand. So I love these things. Or another one would be instead of a kettle, they have a Wasserkocher, which is a water cooker. And that's exactly what a kettle does. It cooks water. It's just so Yeah, I don't know. It's just so cute how explicit it is in directly describing these items.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a very famous Swiss scholar, Ernst Leisy, who said that this is a kind of typical thing for the German language, in contrast to the English language in general. He observed that the German word mündlich, which means oral, is related to Mund, which means mouth. But if you think about the word oral in English, well, that's very different from the word mouth. And so after looking at different examples, he came to the conclusion that the English words are kind of antisocial, as he called him, that they're not integrated into families. And this is something which was taught for a long time as a theory in English linguistics in Germany, and which I tested in my PhD thesis.
Right. Yeah. Mündlich, which we could create an imaginary translation for it, would be mouthly, but and that's what it means, right? Relating to the mouth, just like oral means. Of course, I don't think mouthly is a word in English. Maybe it was at one point, but there are some instances, maybe many instances, where you have a Germanic variant and then a kind of Romance alternative. Maybe one that comes to mind right now is something that relating to the earth. It could be earthly, or it could be terrestrial.
All right. Yeah,
which
that's
I think
true.
is Latin.
Yeah,
terra.
That's absolutely right. And that's a very good example. And this is something that you can observe in general. And I mean, if you go back in the history of the English language, then this is due to the fact that the Normans invaded England in 1066, and afterwards, I mean, French became the language of the rulers, and so a lot of French words that ultimately came from Latin became part of the English language, which had been a Germanic language basically up to then. And so if you think about it, then, there's quite a lot of very common words in English, like day, thing, mother, all these high frequency words, they're all Germanic, just like the prepositions, in, up, grammatical words. But as soon as you have more sophisticated words, like sophisticated, they come from Latin. They're longer, they're less common. So you have words like justice or government or notorious, compensate. And so that allows you to kind of play with the different stylistic levels.
Yes. And so, and then, because there are often kind of Romance alternatives to these Germanic words, and usually the Romance alternatives seem, more sophisticated, more complex, more learned, more elegant, perhaps. You can exploit this for comedic effect, right? You can take a phrase which could probably be described in sort of a concise and short way, and sort of artificially elongate it using this kind of complex Romance vocabulary, which makes it funnier.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I mean, one example would be, I'm walking the dog. And you could also say, I am perambulating the canine.
Yes. There was or one that I came up with today, which is Christina and I will record a podcast today. Christina and I will be spending this present moment of the calendar week utilizing electronic telecommunication to procure a distributable facsimile of our voices for the purposes of proliferating it across the global network.
I am impressed, Dominic.
Well, it was meant to impress, but that's kind of the thing about this language, is that it's affectatious, right? It's pretentious, and sort of that you kind of imagine that if someone is maybe, I don't know, upper class or educated, then they might seek to speak in this sort of educated manner in order to display their education to everyone, and it has this sort of pretentious association.
And I mean, one of the reasons why a lot of the learned vocabulary is of Latin origin is, of course, that during the Middle Ages, Latin was the language of scholars. So they used those words, talking in Latin, writing in Latin. But then, of course, when languages like English became more important, then they just introduced them in English. And that's why we have all this vocabulary that ultimately comes from Latin. But when it's from French, and sometimes also when it's a very old Latin word, then it's not necessarily difficult. For example, the word wine. The word wine is also from Latin, but it's a very old one, so it's less complicated.
Yes, and it becomes more complicated when we have lots of Greek words, but it's Greek via Latin. It's Greek that came through Latin because I suppose the Romans themselves borrowed some of these Greek words, and then they were then eventually borrowed into English. So we get examples like tripod, right? Which is 3 feet in Greek, but it came through Latin, so it's not perfect. Maybe the German equivalent Dreifuß is much more Germanic, much more direct.
Yeah, and that's also what Lysi says, you know. So that's actually one of the other examples that he uses, or on hippopotamus. Hippopotamus as a borrowed word in English, a difficult word, but in German it's Nilpferd, which is Nile horse, like from the river Nile.
I learned this one recently playing a trivia game with some of my German friends. But that's okay because we usually shorten it to hippo.
Exactly, yeah. Happy hippo.
Or hungry hippos. Yeah, that's right.
And I mean, like, all of this is, of course, very convincing, and it looks like Lysi might be right. But so when I wrote my thesis about that, there hadn't been any kind of systematic studies yet, and so I thought, okay, it would be interesting to put that to the test. And well, you know that I usually like using corpus material. So in that case, what I did is I tried to look at the most frequent words in English and in German. So I got these from digital text collections where you just count how often the words occur. And I thought it would be a good idea to look at this most frequent vocabulary because on the one hand, I mean, learners and native speakers need to know that, so it's relevant. But on the other hand, I mean, how common a word is plays a role in so many different ways in the language that I thought, okay, well, that way it's as comparable as it can get.
Oh yeah. And you know, we've been talking a lot about this kind of Romance vocabulary being kind of higher level, but not exclusively, right? There's tons of French-derived, Latin-derived vocabulary that English speakers use in their everyday language. And of course, it's existed in language in English for so long. I mean, 1066. If you're a linguist, then you got to know 1066 because that is the year that everything changed, really. It doesn't even sound foreign anymore. It doesn't sound Latin or French. And maybe contrast this to German because I learned recently because German also has kind of French-derived, Latin-derived vocabulary. Apparently, it's more marked as foreign in German.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so a lot of these words, I mean, for example, let's take the word appendix, you know? I mean, if you are talking about that body part in English, I mean, that's a word that you use. But if I used appendix as appendix in German, it would sound as if I were a medical doctor, you know? Because we have the word Blinddarm, which is like blind, what's Darm? Like where you kind of process the food.
Your intestines?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Or your stomach, maybe?
No, not the stomach.
Oh, the intestine then.
Yeah. So it's like the blind intestines, you know? Okay. And so in German it would be quite marked. And so for that reason, I think that's also possibly what made Lysi feel that that probably the origin, the Romance origin of a large part of the English vocabulary would also have an effect there. And so I set out to test that. But first of all, I had to decide how I could operationalize this idea of antisocial, that is not being part of a family of words. And then I thought, okay, well, on the one hand, if you look at a word, then you can try to split it up into meaningful parts, what we just did before. So that would be a bit like looking for the parents. And on the other hand, you can also try, if you can take that word and make it into a longer word so that it almost has like children. So, for example, if I have the word teacher, then I could have English teacher as a child, but of course teach and ER as the parent.
Yeah, I once heard it argued that, and I mean, I guess the line of reasoning makes sense that if English has such a huge number of these antisocial words, right? And German has, well, comparatively fewer, you would think, because German words are very famous for being comprised of other smaller words put together, like Armbanduhr, and others. Then you would think that maybe German would be the easier language to learn because a learner needs to learn a smaller number of words, right? But apparently that may not actually be the case in reality.
No, not necessarily, I would say, because you still need to remember which words are combined with each other to produce the form that is the kind of standard, that it's, for example, Armbanduhr and not, I don't know, Ringuhr, or, well, I don't know.
Armbanduhr, if you get the order wrong, you could get the order wrong.
Yeah, that's true. You could also have that. I mean, emphasizing the band more. But in German, like in English, it's the last part of a compound that expresses the idea. So an Armbanduhr is a wristwatch, basically.
Yeah.
So we're saying wristwatch. Isn't that a word that also exists in English?
Yes. Yeah, that's just the longer. Yeah, because as opposed to a pocket watch, which nobody really carries anymore. They look so cool. I want one. They look so cool. But of course in German it's more like a wrist clock. So it's a little bit more explicit in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I mean So when I looked at these relations, trying to kind of split up words into their parts or extending them into longer words, I mean, if one of the two is possible, then I would say a word is no longer lonely. It's part of a family. And but of course, if you think about what to do when you split up words into parts, you have to think about what that means. So a bedroom, for example, is a room which contains one or more beds in which people lie down to sleep. So that makes total sense. So you would say, okay, yeah, that's a clear case. But of course, it's also possible to interpret it in a different way. So a bedroom could also be like the room that is filled by a bed, which is standing on the floor, like bed space in a certain way. And
a room of bed. The whole room is a bed. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? I wouldn't mind a proper bedroom.
But there's different ways how you could, of course, interpret it. Yeah. And I mean, it's possible to use the two parts in a paraphrase of the meaning, like I just did. So to me, that was enough. But still, what we can see is that this kind of motivation or transparency is not the same thing as predictability, that you can say, okay, well, it has to mean exactly this. And so I use the term motivatability to express that this is actually only potential. and then for the other direction, for this child direction, I just looked at dictionaries of increasing size to see if I could find longer words which contained the target word.
Okay, very nice, very nice. Oh, now you've got me thinking. Now you've got me thinking about bedrooms and other. In German, it's the sleep room.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly.
I mean, I think any room can be a sleep room if you're determined. So similarly, I always thought living room was funny because it implies that you don't live in the other rooms.
That's true.
I typically am living in every room in the house, but yeah.
Yeah, me too. I hope everyone is alive in every room of the house.
Yeah, I agree. Like, oh, this could be a great joke. Oh, what does a zombie's house have? It has like an unliving room or an undead room. Anyway, work in progress.
I love it.
I need to workshop it. Work in progress.
You're so good, Dominic.
Thank you.
But in any case, so if you kind of try to do that, if you try to split up words, well, then what happens is that on the one hand, you will find words that can't be split up anymore, like leaf.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
And at the other end, you find words like bedroom, where it's kind of clear. But there's a lot of cases in between where you face some obstacles. And so what I did is I looked at all those words many, many times just to make sure that I was really happy with my analysis. And then I also checked what kind of obstacle there was. For example, there could be an obstacle regarding the form, like in the pronunciation. For example, the word preference. If I have a preference for something, well, I prefer it. And then there's the suffix "ens."
Yeah.
But prefer and preference, you can see a difference in the pronunciation.
Right. So, but in the case of preference, yeah, prefer plus "ens," but "ens" as a suffix is not a word by itself if you isolate it, unlike in the compounds like a bedroom or a football. But I have a question with the completely opaque like leaf. Can you ever split apart a single syllable word?
Oh, that's a good question.
I wouldn't think so, right?
Well,
there's not enough to work with there.
It's really difficult. I would say no.
Yeah.
I mean, in a certain way, probably you could split up a plural like feet into foot plus plural.
Yeah.
But then, of course, the question is whether you want to do that or not. But here, I don't.
Yeah, I wouldn't. So I would generally assume most single syllable words are completely opaque. Probably.
Exactly. I mean, at least using the system that I used, and that's why in the beginning of this list, you actually find that most of the words can't be split up into parts because they just consist of single syllables, because that's what we have in the English language. Very, very short words are the most frequent words. So those behave different from the rest.
Yeah.
But what you just said, I mean, the "ens" in the end, I mean, it's a suffix, so it can't stand on its own, but it still has a meaning. And this meaning can be seen systematically in different words. And so that's also that contributes to the motivatability of the word, even though it can't stand on its own.
Fascinating. What else did you find?
Well, I mean, you can also find obstacles in the spelling. So in guidance, if you split that up into guide and ans.
And ents.
then you will find that the silent E that you have in the spelling of guide is dropped in the suffixed form.
Okay. Very nice.
And you can even combine that. So angry. I mean, angry is obviously related to anger. And there's also a suffix E, a Y, that we find in many words. So I just made sure to keep all these things apart, so that in the end I could also combine them with each other.
Oh yeah. Well, the E ending usually it often makes it into an adjective, kind of. So yeah, if something has anger, it is angry, and which I assume over time, principle of economy was shortened to angry.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely plausible to me. And I mean, there's also other types of obstacle, for example, regarding the meaning. If you think about the fact that you can discover something, I mean, there's dis and cover. So it's the idea of uncovering something in a metaphorical way. And so whenever you have such an element of, oh, well, it's not exactly that meaning, but you have to transform it, then I also recognize that as a semantic obstacle.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And the fun thing is you have to be very careful when you try to split up words, because sometimes you have the impression that they can be divided, but it's not true. For example, the word understand. It's got nothing to do with under or stand.
That's right. And you can't overstand something or anything like that. Yeah. I used to say, you can be overwhelmed, you can be underwhelmed, but you can't be just whelmed.
Yeah, you're so right. Sometimes, I mean, the basis is missing. So that's also something that I recognized as another category. So that you had a rest, like whelm in that case, which just doesn't exist as a word in the language. Even though, I mean, whelm wasn't part of my list, I would believe.
Yeah. That's actually, I believe, naval vocabulary, by the way. Lots of naval vocabulary in English. But yeah, this kind of gets into one of my favorite subjects in English, which is lost positives. And not all of these are lost positives. I should explain what it is. A lost positive is where you have a negative word, something like ruthless or disgruntled or like incessant, disheveled, but we don't have the opposite of that, right? We don't have ruthful. We don't have gruntled. We don't have cessant. We don't have shoveled. I think another one is innocent is a famous one. You can be innocent. The opposite of innocent is to be nocent. I think these words once existed in English, but gradually disappeared with time. But you could probably have cases like I said, like overstand or whelmed, where it probably never existed at all.
Yeah. And I mean, you can just kind of also make fun of it in completely nonsensical ways.
Yeah.
If you think about the minimum, in contrast to the maximum, you can also kind of split that up into a mini mum, like a very small mother.
Oh yeah. Or a legend is a legend, and earnest is an earnest. Yeah, these are very nostalgic. I feel like when I was a child sitting in class, just staring at the book, looking for anything to entertain me, right? Because I was in school. I would look at the words and try to pick them apart into these false compounds. Yeah.
And I thought you were listening to the teacher, Dominic.
Well, I can multitask, so.
I know. I mean, you're extremely good at these things. I mean, I would say above average.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, but I mean, to come back to these rests that remain. I mean, in my list, for example, I mean, if we think about the word oral, like Lacey's example, I mean, oral also contains the suffix "l," which we have in quite a lot of adjectives, and so for that reason, I would say, it's kind of partially motivatable. So it's not standing completely on its own in the language, but we have a rest that we can't relate to an English word.
That's exactly right. Yeah. If you were to ask me to pick apart oral, I'd say, well, oral is relating to the or, whatever that is. We don't have it. So
yeah. I mean, there is the word or, the conjunction like and, or, but. But that's not it here.
Not a word to mean mouth.
No, not a word to mean mouth, which obviously in this case, I mean, it's a Latin word for mouth that is used as the basis here. But, but even so, I mean, I would claim that there is a link here, and I mean, all these different obstacles can also be combined with each other. So there's a few more smaller categories, but in the end, what is possible is to look at all of this in detail, but I want to spare you the details. Oh, and by the way, if anyone out there is interested, it's available online, so anyone interested can read the whole book for free.
Excellent. Lots of fun to be had with trying to split words apart. And you can, sometimes it's a history lesson, like lukewarm. Who is Luke? Maybe it should be what is Luke? Yeah, I believe it derived from an old word that basically meant tepid, but of course the word itself has completely fallen out of use.
Yeah, I mean, like with yesterday. What is yester? I mean, it's not a word that we use in present day English, but it's a kind of day, so it can be partly split up. And I think that's a very important part of the message. And I mean, if we look at all of this taken together, then we will actually find that English can be split up. English words can be split up into meaningful parts to a very large extent. So almost 60% of the English words, 59 point something. I mean, German is just a tiny little bit better than that, 66 point something percent, So it's so similar that I wouldn't claim that the German language can be split up, like the words from German can be split up into meaningful parts all the time, whereas the English words are antisocial. I mean, at least for the vocabulary that I looked at and for the method that I used, this was the case. Now, of course, you could also say, oh, well, but it's a trick, because you also accept this kind of partial motivatability where you can have leftovers, like for the oral. But even there, I mean, if you just accept those cases which are perfectly motivatable, like bedroom, then you have about 18% for German and 13% for English, which is very close as well, So it's not a huge difference. So I wouldn't say it's completely different languages in that respect.
Yeah, this is so fascinating because it goes against kind of the popular perception of the two languages in this particular regard, right? I would say a difference of 7% is decent, but not nearly as earth-shattering as people might expect. But there's a hitch, right? There's a hitch in that you're looking at a very wide range of words here. So if you were to really just narrow it down to the super high-frequency words, then it's a bit of a different story, isn't it?
Yeah, then it's a bit of a different story, but then I wouldn't find any motivatability for any of the two languages because we have those monosyllabic words, like the, and, or, and the German equivalents. So I don't think it would greatly change the picture. And it's the same if we kind of try to see what happens if we go down in frequency, then we will find that if we look at the less common words, then most of the time you can split them up into parts, because they're longer, because they're meaningful. And everything that I see in my results shows me that the two languages are more similar than they are different. And not just in the direction of splitting up words to find out if they have meaningful parts, but also trying to see if they can have children. So if we do that, we find that almost 99% of the English words and 96% of the German words have children. They can be expanded into longer words. And if we combine that with the question whether we can split them up into their parts, then we find that it's 99 point something % both for German and for English. So practically no word has to stand alone.
Well, you've reminded me of all this talk has reminded me of a phrase I probably heard one time in school, which we need to ask pregnant questions. A pregnant question is a question which gives birth to many answers, right? So it's a good question, a very good question, because it creates a good discussion. But yeah, this would make sense to me. It would make sense to me that kind of the Romance-derived words are the most motivatable, because they're usually longer. And I just feel like the longer the word is, the more likely you'll be able to pick apart its constituent pieces.
Absolutely. I mean, you're so right. I mean, a longer word gives you more opportunities, just like the German compounds, which are so incredibly long at first sight, Donaudampfschifffahrtsgesellschaftskapitän, etc. But in the end, it's individual words. And so the longer a word is, the likelier you are to find meaning in its parts.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I like that. In that example you were giving, it was a word so long you didn't even want to bother finishing it.
Yeah, no,
that's German, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I'm not going to translate that because it's a nonsense word anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, that's what I found. And what I found in my German learning is that the vast majority of high frequency words every day aren't even the really long compounds. I really don't encounter them very often, to be honest.
No, yeah. So that means, anyone whose native language is not German. So don't be scared off.
Don't be scared off. That's right.
And just to come back to Lysy, I mean, he believed that the Romance origin might be responsible for like English words being more isolated within the language. Now, on the one hand, we saw this is not the case. But on the other hand, what I did is I checked where all those 5,000 words from English, from German, where they come from by looking at historical dictionaries of the two languages. And I found that actually in English, the words that come from Latin are even more motivatable than those from German. So 63% of the Romance words in English are motivatable compared to 49% content of the German words. And in German, it's more or less the other way around. So what you mentioned earlier, namely that the words of Latin origin have a kind of more, let's say, more exotic feel, you know, that you notice them more. Well, probably that's also the reason why we have this feeling as speakers of German that might be the case. But so in English, there's such a wealth of words that ultimately come from Latin that they form their own families. And so they're not alone. So we actually find a lot of relations between words in the language. And I was very happy to find this in my research.
Yeah, very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I try to with German. I was pleased to learn that there is some Latin, French-derived vocabulary, a good deal of it, to a lesser extent than English, I think. Oftentimes, there will be maybe a verb or a word where English opts for the French or Latin, whereas German has its own Germanic-derived alternative, as we discussed. But then often in German, these sort of French, Latin-derived verbs, they all have the same exact verb ending. Which is ieren. So like telefonieren, transportieren, all of them have that ending, which is great for learners. And it's also great for me because a lot of this kind of French-derived vocabulary is more or less shared, right? So if I know this kind of French romance word in English, then I just think of it in German and I just attach the ieren ending. So one time I wanted to say like to conserve, but I didn't know how to say conserve in German. So I said konservieren. And yes, it exists.
Yay! Perfect. I mean, the alternative would have been erhalten.
Right.
But I have to say, konservieren is so common in German. That's a fantastic strategy. So making use of those similarities between the languages. Excellent strategy.
Right. Yeah, you only run the risk of perhaps using a bit of a higher level alternative when there would have been a simpler, maybe Germanic derived word for that. But hey, people will understand you, so it's okay.
Exactly. I think that's even more important. Yeah, Dominic, you're a successful language learner and you're developing your own tricks. That's fantastic. And of course, there's a lot of tricks that one can use.
Yeah, and I strongly encourage it. I hope every language learner does. Languages become a lot less scary once you kind of figure out how to break down these words into their constituent parts. No linguistics degree necessary.
Definitely not. And I mean, even in my PhD thesis, I really made sure that I only split up the words into parts that anyone could recognize. So not necessarily with linguistic training. And I think the results are very encouraging because they show us that even the very, very frequent words, even those where you wouldn't expect it, can be split up into meaningful parts most of the time. So this is a very good strategy.
Yeah, the library of prefixes and suffixes is pretty consistent. And once you learn what they mean, you can even start inventing your own new words.
That's absolutely true. And I mean, for example, if you have a word like misinterpretation, I mean, it may look scary at first, but if you look at it, I mean, mis means like incorrect. Interpret, well, that's probably the basis that you already know. And then you have ation in the end, which is the act of doing something. In this case, interpreting. So misinterpretation, well, can be remembered more easily by just recognizing that there's meaningful parts in it. Not all of them can stand on their own, but still they're meaningful.
Oh, yes, absolutely. A previous president of the United States, George W. Bush, was famous for the ways he employed the English language. And sometimes he would, probably not on purpose, but he would invent kind of new words on the fly. And a famous one is he said, misunderestimate. They misunderestimated me. Now,
I love it.
I love it too. He meant to say they underestimated him. But, misunderestimate, to underestimate by mistake, maybe it works.
It works, and it means you shouldn't underestimate me, That's
right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So this idea of, trying to find meaning in words is definitely a helpful strategy. It doesn't work always, but most of the time it's a good idea. And I mean, in some cases, you just need to be aware that you have to deal with some obstacles in the form. So life and live, I mean, there might be a change between an F and a V. And of course, it could also be that in the end, not all the parts are meaningful, that some rest remains. But even so, you can try to, for example, see if it's a noun or an adjective by looking at the suffix in the end. And so that way, if you encounter a new word in the context, well, that can be helpful for understanding it and ultimately also for learning it.
I think a lot of this highlights that whenever you're learning a language, cognates are your best friend. Cognates are words that are, well, more or less shared across different languages, which derive from the same root, basically. Now, sometimes there are false cognates. They're called false friends, which is a really cool name, right? Where it looks like a cognate, and maybe it was at one point, but it's developed different meanings in the respective languages. And so if you use it, you might end up not saying what you mean to say. But definitely capitalize on cognates as much as you possibly can. And yeah, especially among the European languages, there are many of them, particularly those deriving from Latin.
Definitely. I mean, if you think about English, president, minister, invite. I mean, in French, it's président, ministre, invité. In Spanish, it's presidente, ministro, invitar. Very similar, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I was stunned by that when learning French.
And I mean, if you look at English and German, I mean, you will find that the very common words are so similar. I mean, we have brother, Bruder. We have mother, Mutter. We have hand and milk and Milch. There are so many similarities. I mean, it's a very good idea to just kind of have an open mind for the similarities, either in the pronunciation or in the spelling. And that can be so helpful.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that was something that really struck me, because when looking at the language family tree, English and German are part of the same language family, and you can really see that DNA in the everyday language. You see that in kind of the simple daily language, kind of English and German kind of have this very evident link. But then when you get into a bit of the fancier language, the link to French becomes more clear.
Definitely. And what is very interesting, by the way, as a linguist, there's another kind of trick that I recently found out, because English and German developed in different directions between the 6th and 8th centuries in the High German sound shift. And that means that now sometimes there are words which you may not immediately recognize as belonging together. But as soon as you're aware of this principle, you can discover that actually there are words that are equivalents. So, for example, the word thing and the word ding. You notice the th corresponds to a d, but not just here. It's the same in thorn and dawn, for example, which means the same thing. Actually, in English, where you have a th, either a th or a the, this corresponds to a d, a D in German. And so if you find the word distal, well, then if you know that, you can replace the D with a th, and then you get thistle.
Yes, or Wasser and water, where the T has been replaced by a double S. There's a video on YouTube by Rob Words where he actually breaks down this shift, and he teaches the viewers how to undo it, so that maybe
that's so cool.
English speakers can look at German, English speakers with no knowledge of German can look at German, undo these sound changes, and find that maybe they understand more German than they think.
Oh, that's fantastic. I wasn't aware of that video, but that's exactly what I meant here. I mean, it's the same for the p and the p, for example, where you have pan and pfanne, for example. So cool. I mean, you know, I'm a huge fan of Rob Watts.
Yeah,
so,
me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
So shout out. I'm sure it's a cool video.
Yeah, whenever we're learning languages, some of these tricks we might use to try to memorize things, they're called mnemonics, which is not pronounced the way it's spelled. It starts with a silent M. I'm sure it's there for a reason. Like many silent letters, they're usually there for a reason. Sometimes they're there for no reason. If some smart fellow from the past inserted it there to kind of make it resemble Latin. But mnemonics are these really handy tools, kind of these, whether it's kind of like a story or a song or a phrase that you might use to remember a piece of information.
Yeah, absolutely. I find them very helpful too. And I mean, there's mnemonics for all kinds of things. For example, for spelling, when you find it difficult to remember when you should spell here with E-R-E or with E-A-R, well, just remember you hear with your ear, and ear is spelled E-A-R. So when it's about hearing, then it's E-A-R. And when it's like here or there, then it's E-R-E.
Similarly, this one is US specific, but in memorizing how to spell principal, as in the headmaster of a school, I learned this very recently, that the British call it a headmaster, which to me sounds really delightfully antiquated and archaic. It's very, very reminiscent of Hogwarts. Whether you're talking about the headmaster in a school or whether you're talking about a principle as in terms of like a value that a person has or something like that, like a moral principle, they would say the principal is your pal, because principal, the headmaster of a school, ends in PAL. Of course, I always thought that was funny because it's a strong... Is the principal really my pal? Well, I hope so. In the best case, I hope so. Yeah,
and I mean, there's also, for example, mnemonics for learning vocabulary, like AM and PM are notoriously difficult. Which is in the morning, which is in the afternoon. And I mean, if you think about the ordering of the alphabet, A becomes before P, so that really helps you to remember that AM is before noon.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Hard for me with that one because I think just through rote memorization, I never had an issue with that one. But I could definitely understand, especially because I think in Europe and much of the world they use the 24-hour clock, so that makes sense to me.
It's so difficult for us. And I mean, if you think about vocabulary in general, I mean, for vocabulary, there's no general rules like for spelling or for grammar. And there very often it makes sense to kind of think of a little rhyme or story individually. For example, the word funnel. If I, as a German, want to learn what a funnel is, so in German it's Trichter, I can remember that a funnel is like a tunnel through which something will go, and that can help. Or alternatively, Dominic, for you as an English learner of German, if you wanted to learn the German word for caterpillar, Raupe, you could associate it with a rope, and you could imagine a stretched out caterpillar that looks like a rope, and this could help you.
Yes, exactly. I love these types of little tricks, and there's no shame in using them, by the way. Like I've heard some learners like kind of intuitively come up with them, but they don't want to say that they use them. There is no shame. These things are the best and most efficient way to learn, in my opinion. I made heavy use of mnemonics when studying Japanese. There's a very famous book called Remembering the Kanji by James Heisig, which uses the Heisig method, and the Heisig method is mnemonics. It's heavy use of mnemonics. What they do is actually you learn the meaning of the Japanese characters, of the Chinese characters in English first, so you can say the meaning of it in English before you know how to say it in Japanese, but actually that ends up really giving you a really strong basis. And similarly to these antisocial words, motivatability, you might look at the Chinese characters, and if you assume every Chinese character is antisocial, then, oh my God, how could a human possibly memorize them all, right? But actually, they're not. Actually, they're motivatable in the same way that they have these constituent pieces. They're called radicals, but they have these constituent pieces, and usually each constituent piece has a specific meaning. And when combined and put together, it creates a new meaning. And so based on these constituent parts, you can create little mnemonics in your head.
Yeah. Absolutely. And as you said, I mean, in learning languages, in remembering vocabulary, grammar, etc., everything is permitted. Everything that helps you remember. And very often it's the crazy stuff that will help you remember. I mean, I'm a native speaker of German, so it's easy for me to know the gender that words have, but learners find that very hard. And I recently read a very interesting trick, so I don't know if that might work for you as well, Dominic. But if you think about the kind of standard traditional colors like blue for male and red for female, and then something neutral. So they suggested that if you learn a new word, like, for example, dog, which is masculine, then der Hund, you could imagine a blue dog. You could imagine a red cat because it's die Katze, female, or a yellow chicken because it's das Huhn and neutral.
Actually, I have my language learning app does that when the word is masculine or feminine. It gives it a blue shade or kind of a pink shade. So
cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. So cool. I love that. But of course, I mean, also for English, there's a lot of mnemonics. I mean, many of them are in German. So probably since this podcast is in English, it's better to restrict myself to something which I can also say in English. But even there's some very helpful ones. For example, if and would is no good. So if you have an if clause, you shouldn't use would in the if clause.
Yes.
It's a common mistake. Or another one, it's also very difficult to know when to use the simple past and when to use the present perfect. And there's a few words that can help you. And so you could remember yesterday, ago, and last require using the simple past. But never, ever, since, and for open present perfect store.
Fascinating.
I think it's very nice.
Yeah. These definitely are for English learners because I'm not familiar with any of these.
Yeah. I mean,
nice.
These are not so famous. I mean, a very, very famous one in German is he, she, it, das S muss mit, which is he, she, it. You need to take an S along, which reminds you to use a third person singular S. And there's a lot of these. And I have to say, I love them and I collect them. So I would love to have more of these. So if anyone out there would like to submit some, that would be fantastic.
Yes, please do. We love this idea of crowdsourcing linguistic knowledge. It's always amazing what some people know or can come up with. So please drop us a comment wherever you can or send us an email at linguisticsbts@yahoo.com. We'd be really happy to hear from you all.
Oh yeah, that would be so cool.
I too enjoy enlarging my linguistic repertoire.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Well, I don't know if there's a mnemonic for ending an episode, but if there is, I'll try to remember it. Christina, I think we're out of time.
That's true. I think we ought to stop. So stay curious, everyone out there. Have fun with language.
And join us next time on Linguistics Behind the Scenes.